Here we have our character broadsheets. We make references to characters past and have invited characters from previous campaigns into the current ones. But with no context, the legends that many of these characters become would have been lost to time. I want to take some time to talk to each player about a character that they've played, to keep the legends alive and to possibly hold their memories hostage, so that way I can leverage them against the fresh faces of our adventure. So, tonight we're going to be talking about mostly Balthazar, but our current game master, dungeon master, Anthony is here. So we already talked about when we first started playing, but did you want to go over more of that? Like, because you kind of invited me to the campaign, but did you have talks before that with 2.0 about like the campaign?
Actually, the way that our D&D group actually started was Harmon Quest, the show. I don't even think that we had watched Community yet, because we had what was it? We watched Community. No, we watched Harmon Quest, and then that whole thing is them playing Pathfinder, and it's like mostly improv. It's like a whole panel. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend watching it. But we got such a kick out of it, and we were like, oh my god, that's super easy. And then of course, back in high school, like, I low-key really wanted to play D&D, but at the time, like, the friend group was like, nah, man, like we don't do that here, right? And
What are
so
you, some kind of nerd?
yeah, basically. So I was like, me? No, not me. I'm not a nerd. You're a nerd.
Clarify, when we graduated high school, that was like, I think Iron Man 2 was announced to come out that year. So nerddom wasn't like, nowadays nerdom is a cool thing. Back then you got shunned. Like, there were levels
Basically.
of nerddom, and you could be, if you were on the top, cool, you weren't that much, but you were still shunned by everyone else. And then the real nerdy ones were like the ones no one talked to.
Yeah, I mean, mostly, right? Like you know what real nerds are. Real nerds
Yeah.
know real. But yeah, so I mean, like, it was one of those things where it was like, man, I this seems like a fun idea to try out. Why not fucking try it? And then when we became adults and stopped giving a shit about what everybody thought, that's when we actually like started doing it. One sec. So but yeah, so it was like super nerdy culture. And then when we got old enough to like stop giving a shit, then it was like, oh, there's this super cool show by the guy who did Community, and we were like, oh, Community is a funny show, haha. We've seen a few things, but they're like, Kyle was like, oh, well, he plays D&D in that show. I'm like, oh, well, let's watch it. And then we fucking loved it because they also animate on top of it, so you get to have like an actual visual representation of what's going on. I was like, huh, well, I've always wanted to play D&D, but never. All right, so once we all got old enough and we were like, stopped giving a shit about being a nerd and like the fucking issues that would arise as such, Kyle was like, hey, watch Harmon Quest. There's a lot of hype around it. We watched Harmon Quest and we actually really liked it. So I was like, I wonder how hard it would be to actually like put together like a D&D group. And you and I had talked about you like playing Dark Heresy campaign, so on and so forth, and you were like, well, I've played before. And I was like, all right, would you be down? And you said yes. And so it's like, so me, Kyle, I really had to twist Amanda's arm because she was like, I don't know, that's kind of like nerdy, right? Like what they're doing minus all of the animation, like, we're not professional comedians or anything like that, so like that's got to be kind of stupid, right? And then lo and behold, 2.0 was like, well, I mean, I could run it, it's not that hard. And I'm like, really, it's not that hard? He's like, no. So we put it together, and yeah, the rest is history. It was 6 years later, we're all still sitting here playing D&D. So
It's really strange to think like half a decade has gone by since we started actually playing together. So like, if you can remember back to the end of the first session of 2.0's campaign, do you like, what was your honest opinion at the end of it? hype, excited, dismayed, didn't go as well as you plot? Like, what was running through your head?
When 2.0's campaign was over, I was like, okay, that was cool. It was kind of disappointing because of Balthazar's backstory that we'll get into, but it was kind of disappointing because I didn't actually want to have my character be like the main attraction, right? And I mean that's ultimately that's what he ended up being, right? It was Balthazar's adventure. And I was like, that's fine. Sure.
It was really disappointing to end the campaign after. I'm going to be honest and say, like, the end of the first session I thought went really good. Like, I could already tell some of the player archetypes that were going to happen, but like I felt like, oh, that went pretty good for like a first session of people that
definitely with some foreshadowing going on.
Because at that point in time, I had only met Kyle a few times. I had met Amanda a few times at your guys' place, but that was it. So that first session was really like oh wow, like this actually went really well compared to my expectations. But I was really disappointed that we explored Balthazar's backstory in the first campaign, and then we started to delve into Legion's backstory, and then just stopped.
Well, and the point of that, it was just because 2.0, his DM style was really weird in that he didn't do a whole lot of prep unless something inspired him, like days before, and then he would like do a bunch of shit, right? So he was definitely that like, what is that? The like the last minute like prepping guy, right? Where he's like, oh God, that's really fun, and then he would just do it really fast. And I'm like, in hindsight, like now knowing what I know, I'm like, oh God, dude, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're just gonna, you know what I mean? Like wait for some sort of muse to give you the next adventure or whatever. I'm like, that's no. And that's ultimately what happened, was because I don't know if you remember, he was like, I don't have anything planned this week. Let's do it again next week, and then next week, and then next week, and then we were like, all right, well, that's over. So that was like super fun, but we really, because the rest of us were players, we never had anybody go, well, why don't we just continue that story, take these characters, and just have someone else DM? Like if Kyle would have wanted to DM, it would have been like, oh, okay, so that's super fun. Kyle can DM, but then what happens to Legion, right? Then you would get into DMPCs and so on and so forth, and that was like, luckily, that's like we ended up imploding that group, because then enough time passed, a couple of months, where it was like, I really want to keep playing D&D, but no one's gonna run it.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Kyle's campaign first, and he tried twice, right? He did his one story campaign, and then he did his murder house campaign. Yeah,
which the one story campaign, looking back at it, was kind of like, we should have expected the second campaign, the full length campaign that we did with it, to go the way it did, because the first campaign that he did that lasted maybe a month or two, it went exactly the same way. Like it was starting to head down that same path.
Yeah, very railroady.
His murder house campaign, that murder mystery house, that was amazing. Like I found my notebook when I was moving last time, and I just spent like 3 hours looking at all these notes I had written about
for sure.
the different characters and stuff like that, and all the little item cards that he'd made out, and I was like, that's cool. And then when we did this campaign, it was like, oh.
Well, and that all of that aside, after that campaign ended, the small like beginnings where we took a left, where we were I guess supposed to take a right, and then the murder house, all that stuff, then it was like, okay, well, I still want to play, right? Yeah. And so it's like, I need, and so as with, apparently, if you look online, as with the case of many, I was like, well, if no one's gonna run it, why don't I run it?
Yeah.
And that was, I think we did your what do you call it first? Your Fallout campaign first. pre actual release Bethesda Fallout TTRPG.
Yeah,
it was the homebrew Fallout Online. Yeah,
from 3 other people's homebrews. Like one of them was, I remember specifically, one of them was like items. One of them I used for like making NPCs and random encounters, and then the third campaign I was just like, oh, these are going to be the mechanics of the game, and it was horrible, mostly because of the GM style. But we can talk about that on like a different character broadsheets about GM stuff.
Oh yeah.
But we're here about the players. So when you're a player, what's the most important thing to you about playing when it comes to TTRPGs? More specifically, what do you look to get out of any interaction when we play? Like, what is the main thing that brings you to the table, and what's the main thing that like gets you to come back the next week?
So that's actually that's a double question, because the thing that I usually look for when I'm a player is some sort of gritty realism. I like having that challenge of things being realistic. I like how do I put this? I guess I'm more of a low magic kind of person when I go to a game or whatever, because it makes you be more creative, right? So like with Balthazar, the second iteration of Balthazar, where he was the Forge Cleric, I was trying to figure out ways to fix stuff, because you get the whole ability to be able to do whatever. So I got to like where the Kyle had destroyed our cart that we had built, and then I was like, okay, I can't use my ability, but I can use carpentry skills, and I have all this stuff, so can I blah 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 blah, right? Instead of just using magic to do whatever. But that's what I look for, is a lot of like I like a relatively realistic game. But what keeps me coming back is usually trying to do things that will help the other party members, like, so the other players, like whatever you're trying to do, I want to try that, and then see if it happens. If it doesn't, then there's always something else that someone else wants to try, like creating a new organization or gaining warlock powers when Tasha's comes out. That's usually, I'm trying to be a team player, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. One last question before we actually start deep delving into Balthazar. So what's something that you've wanted to do in a session, whether mostly as a player, but I'll accept GM answers as well. What's something you want to do in a session that you haven't been able to do yet?
Well, as a player, something that I haven't been able to do yet is to have a PC get killed organically. No, I know that's a like, me being me, my D&D Beyond has rarely ever dipped below 30 characters, right? So I'm always like, I like to make, that's also part of realism, is that I like to like make characters that like, yeah, you can kill me, go for it. I taunted Dan as a DM before, like, you can't kill me, come on, do it, because I got like 30 other characters that I really want to play, but I picked this one to fill the role, so like, maybe we could, and that is for sure one thing that I wanted. Tried it with Aridin. I had to sunset Aridin as a death. With Julian, it was kind of forced, although it kind of happened organically. It kind of didn't. But I mean, with Balthazar, I definitely, he just didn't die at the end of it. So I was like, okay, well, this has to happen now. And so, it just, that's one thing that I've wanted to do. As a GM, I've wanted to have an actual TPK, because I think that when people get over character death, it opens you up. Like, care about your characters 100%. I mean, you fucking big boy, big baby dick truck. Like make a character that you, right. I will make a character that you care about. Make a character that has depth and meaning and all that, and then also let them die, because you need to feel that. I think everybody needs to feel that. And that way, when you get to your next character, you won't look at them as like a, well, you're sloppy seconds. Man. Like, no. You make a character that you're going to love because you need to feel those emotions. That's what I usually like. D&D has been such a great way to like feel feelings and like do the whole empathy thing that's definitely a big one for me. So it's always, I want people to be sad because, I'm sad. So there you go.
We really should have a between the character broadsheet session that's just GM, like about your GM style and your campaigns. I think that'd be cool. But let's talk about Balthazar for now. We can do that another day. So, Balthazar was first introduced in 2.0's campaign. What's his full name? Beginning. I know he was a paladin, correct?
Yeah. So Balthazar's full name is Balthazar Norixian Dreathos the Fourth. Came from a long line of Dragonborn paladins because, as most people end up doing, a Dragonborn Paladin is a Dragonborn Paladin. Of course, he's Oath of Vengeance when he started out because that's the best build. Yeah. Because I also enjoy power gaming. Not to a fault.
Everyone needs a little bit of power gaming once in a while.
I mean, like if I play heroic fantasy, I want to be a hero. I want to be, exactly. You want to be Conan the Barbarian who doesn't lose, right?
You don't want to be Joe Blow, the peddler who's now picked up a sword and is like, I'm ready to do my part.
I've made 8 characters who are just that. But yes, that is true. You don't want to necessarily be like some fucking whatever. But so he's a vengeance paladin in the first campaign that we played. And then after all of that, I was like, oh, I think I bought the DMG and was like, hey, oh, no, I didn't even buy the DMG. I looked up paladin subclasses and there was one about the Oathbreaker. I was like, I've never even fucking heard of this. I thought it was homebrew, but as it turns out, it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide to make an evil paladin. And I was like, ooh, I want to be that. Can I be that? And then 2.0 was like, yeah, sure. You just have to break your oath. I'm like, well, yeah. And then that was where he got the notion of, oh, actually, Balthazar's the one that did all of the things. And then I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. Yeah. Like, I thought it could have been like, show mercy. And then that's not vengeance, but, is what it is. So then he was Oathbreaker after that.
Yeah. So who is Balthazar? Personality, like, what was, when you first met the party on session 1, what was did you know immediately what his be, or did it slowly come over time? Did you already have a personality picked out, or did that just develop over multiple sessions as well?
Right.
Any quirks of theirs that you'd like to discuss as well?
So the like with most people, right? My first character was just sort of like an iteration of myself, because I'm like, why don't I just be in this? Because I'm somewhat narcissistic, like many people are, right?
Everyone is a little.
Yeah, right. To one degree or another. But Balthazar's whole personality was very like straight brow, just like this face. Really, that's his whole thing. That was like his whole like, yeah, all right, I guess. But then as he went through that whole thing, he actually started to develop like this sort of like bitter hatred for things. Like, just in general, just being angry that long, like, he just started to be like, yeah, okay, this is bullshit. All right, this is bullshit. Oh, this guy over here, Legion, with his fucking imp or whatever that we can't see, fuck him, right? And so he started to kind of, like, develop this sort of, like, bitterness towards, like, his party. And then we had our Aliaga who kept sliding underneath giant fucking monsters and getting stepped on and shit. He was like, come on. Like, that was his whole, like, he just started to feel that way. But, the quirk that he ended up having when I ended up playing him the second time was he was the the adventurer stereotype. Like, okay, I've been through this a few times. Sure, why not? Let's just, okay, yep, we want to get the gold, we want to kill the mimics, we want to, let's, and then he was super murder hobo. I don't know if you remember that, but he was very murder hobo-y in the second iteration of him.
In the second campaign, yeah.
Which, I don't know if we're going to talk about backstory or not, but, like, that's like the big overarching thing for Balthazar is he dies and comes back. He's very much Edge of Tomorrow. For
I think
a reason.
we touched on this a little bit with Thurai, but we can get to that in that's a question later on. You know now, but
yeah.
So we've discussed that they were a paladin. So you've had 2 iterations that you've played up to this point. A 3rd iteration that was a DM NPC. No, he was more or less kind of
villain.
He was a pre-BBEG bad guy, and then there's hints in the current campaign of Embers of Hope that he might show up as well. So, I want to know the original class and multi-class that you picked out for them, why you picked that out for him, and then on top of that, if you want to, you can elaborate on them if you're not, but I want to hear like the main class and subclass / multi-class of each of the other iterations. And if you want to go in depth of like why you made those choices for that character, you can. But I just want to hear about the first one and the last one more primarily.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the first one was he started out straight up just Paladin, Oathbreaker, or I mean Oath of Vengeance, and then we swapped subclasses before they gave you the. Quick side note: you can do anything you want in any game, right? Obviously. So when we changed his subclass to an Oathbreaker, that was 5 whole years before Tasha's came out and said, yeah, you can change subclasses whenever you want to. I'm like, you really need like a book to tell you you can do that? If I tell you that a bag of holding actually doesn't hold anything, it's just a joke name for a magic item, that's what it is. You know what I mean? But that's what he started out as, and the reason that he was a paladin was because we as a group were talking about, okay, what do we need? We have a druid, we have a cleric, we have a warlock, we need a tank. And I was like, oh yeah, I can tank. I love Reinhard. Why not? And so that's what it was. And then I was like, I picked Dragonborn's not solely for the attributes that you get, because remember this is before D&D Beyond. We were still paper and pencil, right? So we were making all of the mistakes on paper and pencil that you make when you're writing it all out. But I wanted all the bonuses and everything that you would get, because I'm like, if he's gonna be a tank, he's got to be the best fucking tank that you can be. Yeah. Which at the time, that's what he was. Kind of. Yeah, he was a healing tank. Because we also, you had you as Thurai was a healer, but I was like, take a little bit of that stress off. We can still have a utility healer if we need to. And then the second time that I played him, he was a Forge Cleric who ended up, I believe I had him multi-class as a fighter. He took 2 levels of fighter and then was Forge. No, never mind. Nope. No, that's right. I was going to, and then we all ended before he had a chance to. Because I was like, clerics get something nearly every level, and I love clerics. Clerics are like, that's my shit. And so I was a Forge Cleric's doubly so, because he was supposed to, like, he gets a whole bunch of shit. You can +1 magic this or +1 magic that. You can make anything you want, yada yada yada. So actually, I never got a chance to multi-class as him. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. That's and then when he was a bad guy, when he was a villain, he was NPC Magic Man.
Got it.
He
was the NPC class. It's pretty
what I did was I respect a Death Knight, and then I added some stuff. I gave him the ability to cast multiple spells, but I balanced it with him having a mental breakdown if he did. Like his mind would break, and that's the whole lore reason, all that stuff. And then you guys killed him with a ring of fireball, or a wand of fireballs. Allegedly.
Yeah.
You defeated him with a wand of fireballs. Let's put it that way. That's probably better. But I
all 9 charges of it in one attack.
Surprisingly enough, the first multi-class character that I ever did, I guess, was for Dan's campaign. But That's another story for another time.
Yeah. So, when you first made Balthazar, where did you see him going? And where do you see them going when you first made them? And did you ever look ahead past like more than 10 sessions ahead of where we were and going, I want to make this choice so that affects that there? Or just played it by ear after you made a goal?
Yeah, I did want him to ultimately be the de facto king of the Dragonborn people that was in the thing, because I was like, his whole thing was supposed to, in my head canon, was supposed to play out to where he would basically overthrow whoever was there, become the king, and then I was legit going to retire him completely. But when all of that shit went down, and then it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess he's gonna keep playing, and then 2 sessions later we end, and I'm like, well, that's meh.
Yeah.
But I definitely have an end goal in sight for him. Well, not in sight. I have an end goal for him, but likely that won't happen until we're, on our deathbeds in real life.
Yeah, way in the future.
D&D takes time. But.
Yeah. So the next question is kind of muted because we both know that his story hasn't ended. For more or less, you made it originally so that when he was introduced in Kyle's campaign, Balthazar was punished by the gods for his killing all... Well, actually, no, before that, when we were in your first campaign, Heroes of Yore, you made it so that more or less he had been punished because he had done such a heinous crime of more or less killing off all the dragons that weren't allegiant to him. And so you made it originally that Balthazar was not going to die. More or less, so you had an easy... I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong here, that you had an easy out for, I can make Balthazar as this, or as this class, and this combination, and all that stuff. And then later on, I thought it would be cool to write a story about Thurai, of how Thurai and the rest of the party had been converted from their good selves, and I never finished that. I got it started and stopped. But I more or less made it Thurai's mission of, now that I know what he can do, I have to stop him. Like, I have to make sure that the gods forgive him. That's my goal. Where do you want Balthazar's story to end, though, is going to be my real question here.
Right. Balthazar's story ends in my headcanon, which is effectively the canon for him, when he has lived every life that is possible. Mechanically, what that means is when he plays every class and subclass for D&D 5e that there is. Basically. If that never happens, then that never happens, and that's fine. But, because, yeah, where he came from, of effectively mass genocide of Dragonborn in one world, his punishment was that he has to live a life for every life that he took, which covers every life. And he's already been through 4 iterations now.
Yeah.
So what would have come out in Kyle's second campaign would have been that Arlen, the cleric that I played there, was actually Balthazar. And that so that would have been the war cleric, and then even if they die in that campaign, or if the campaign never finishes, as long as I can play him, that's fine. Also, yeah, what that meant was that any campaign, and hopefully any game that I play or whatever, like, if my first character dies, then I'm bringing him in, and for whatever benefits or whatever detriments, there'll always be a Gold Dragonborn who is insert class subclass here.
Yeah.
Even in your campaign, even in Far Realms, had Julian died prematurely, the next person would have been Balthazar. I mean, we had discussed that if Julian had died before he had reached his end goal, which we'll get to his character broadsheet at some point in time, but if Julian had died before his end goal, and Michael wasn't mature enough to have learned how to be a captain,
we had made it a goal of we're going to bring Balthazar in, more or less, into this campaign as a new captain, and just have it be, yep, this is the guy. He's a good captain. Yada yada yada. Blah blah blah. Whatever. But I want to know, what's an adventure that Balthazar has done off screen that we haven't seen?
I actually made an entire campaign about this, and I've already recruited several people. There is a campaign that I have that I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but it's called the Lawbringers. And basically, it is going to be an entire group of paladins, only paladins, whose sole goal is to destroy Belior, the primordial. That's the whole thing. Because of what he did to Cinder and Balthazar. Basically, Balthazar has a chance to make a pact with somebody, and then he can break off a piece of his soul shard that he has, give it to them, almost like lichdom. That pretty much tangles them into the same pact as he has with all of the gods, because it's the one thing that all the gods can agree is that this dude's pretty fucking bad, so we need to get him out of here. So there's this whole like extra dimensional thing where I'm like, anytime you guys play a paladin, Balthazar is likely going to be there at some point, kind of like open the dimensional door and go, hey, you want to go save the world? All right, come on. And then that would have been an entire campaign that I have in my Notion files. But yeah, that's one that's off screen for sure. I hope we can one day get to. I just need everybody to have made a paladin.
Yeah, exactly. And there's maybe there's one paladin we shouldn't bring in, but we'll do a character broadsheet on that person.
Dude, I'd be totally down. I would be totally down for Deus to be there, but he, he's having a bad time right now.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if he ever gets a chance to get out of that weird flesh warping that happened to him, hopefully he can he'll join up. But
just Mayo, the human paladin.
Yeah.
Balthazar, the dragonborn paladin. Deus,
funny enough,
what the fuck are you?
Yeah. But there, Kyle actually did. He actually did make a paladin character once that was super intriguing, and he was a paladin or he was a warlock. He didn't know, because it's kind of the same thing if you look at it in a certain light. He would like what is that, like Marin, I think, from Dragon Ball. Whenever he would sneeze, he would turn into this other person. And then turn back. And I was like, that's effectively, he would make two character sheets and he would level them up at the same time, which is a great concept, But yeah. So that's that.
Well, we're near the end, but I want to ask, will you play I mean, of course you're going to. We've already described in the last 4 that you're going to play him again, but I want to ask something better than this. You have it so that he plays every class in D&D. That's your main goal with Balthazar. I want to know, are you willing to have a Balthazar in every single game that we try to run? I mean, doing a Fallout RPG, Balthazar is going to be weird, having a giant death claw on the party, but
yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
dude, for sure. Like like I said, when we did Starts Without Number, he was my backup. Yeah. Whenever we do Cyberpunk, he'll be my backup. And even if that means that there's some weird muty race that, like, this is what happens when you fornicate with a lizard person, you get this guy, that's what he's gonna be. You know what I mean? Like,
see,
that's just how it goes.
I love each other.
Yeah. But because in my canon, because he killed every dragonborn, went before the gods said for the rest of time, you have to make up this debt by doing this, whatever iteration that takes, we can, like has become a slogan in our campaign, flavor is free. I can reskin anybody or anything to look like a dragonborn, even if he can't, fucking fly or breathe fire. I'll be playing him again. In fact, if you guys are lucky enough in my current campaign, you might be able to see the fruits of your guys' endeavors at what happens to Balthazar in this world. But, you know, you're so close. So very
Is there
close.
anything else you want to say about Balthazar before we end tonight's episode?
Every iteration of him has always been one thing. This is what a murder hobo looks like. You should never be what a murder hobo looks like. They get their way a lot of the time, but ultimately they always get their comeuppance. So, you know, and buy pizza for your DM.
Or at least beer.
Yeah, you know.
That's going to be it for character broadsheets. Tune back in again next week, and we'll have another one for you.
Ooh, this is gonna be a fun edit.